This is an interview for House District 52 with Jeff Helfrich. Uh, Jeff, why don't you take a minute and 2 minutes and introduce yourself? Tell us about who you are and why you're running.
So I was sitting here 2 years ago as the representative, but this year, this cycle, I'm the candidate. So for me, I entered public service. I actually grew up in Colorado and in Nebraska. Spent a lot of time on the family farm and ranch in Nebraska, where my mom and dad were originally from, but went to school in Colorado and had the ability to learn a lot about hard work and what it meant to be on a farm and work with your hands and just sit back and take in nature and have a appreciation for what we can do in Nebraska and Colorado. But one day I decided to follow my father and my uncle's footsteps, who all were in the military, and I joined the Air Force. I traveled around the world a couple different times. Was served in the first Gulf War. Got to see the good and bad side of things. Probably the best thing I'd say that I saw during that campaign, or during the Desert Shield and Desert Storm, was got to meet Bob Hope and be part of his security detail. And that he's a true legend, and he was true inspiration for the troops. And it was just neat to see him and be a part of that, and just have him. I was able to give him a little pin, a little yellow ribbon that he wore on his chocolate chip BDUs when he went back home. And he referenced that in one of the interviews. It was just pretty neat to see and be a part of that guy that was such a legend. But when I was in the military, I was also in Honduras, and I was a bomb dog handler, and so I served searching explosives and was on presidential details and things, and really kind of gave back that way and really wanted to do something and have an impact. And so became a police officer. I tested around different areas, but I ended up in Portland. Served there for 25 years and always looked to have the ability to problem solve when I showed up to somebody's door. It wasn't about what happened, what they're doing, what their personal lives are. It was about, why are we here? How do we fix this problem? And you had to do a lot of different things in a short amount of time. You had to be a social worker to figure out the resources that need to get, the phone numbers to contact, the follow-up to do with, be a law enforcement officer if you have to arrest somebody, but also be that compassionate ear and understanding how to just fix a problem, and do we just give a timeout to people and let them go somewhere else. Those things there, and the being on mounted patrol when I was there in Portland, it was just a great experience and give that community connection. But I took that when I met my wife, Shauna. We moved to Cascade Locks, and that's where I got into politics, was wanting to get back. And I watched what was going on in Cascade Locks, became a budget committee member, planning commissioner, and then on in the city council, and got into economic development. Did that for several years with the board of McKed, Mid-Columbia Economic Development District. Understood what it means to have jobs in a community, and how if you have those good high-paying jobs, that creates that wealth in that community, and then people are able to prosper and not have to raise taxes. And so when we moved to Hood River, I had stepped away from the city council and allowed somebody else to serve in that role, because I wasn't in that community representing them. And then I became the state representative for this House District in 52, House District 52, from 17 to 19. And I got two bills passed. It was a Eagle Creek Fire Recovery Bill, which was assisted Multnomah County and Hood River County for training and assistance and money for training, and then a bill for education. And for me as a freshman legislator, that was a big deal. We as lawmakers are supposed to pass bills. We can talk with constituents and help them through problems, but our job is for policy and moving those forward. And then from that, worked closely with the governor for both Washington and Oregon about our opportunity zones, which creates the ability for people to reinvest money, their capital gains money, and not get taxed on it right away, and create jobs and opportunities here in our communities. And so we got Cascade Locks, which is a depressed community in itself, and we had to work with the governors to get the census tracts reorganized, and we were able to do that and ended up on a top list and federally recognized, and those are being well received right now in the investments. So the reason why I want to get back to Salem, we need to have balance. We're watching what's going on in Salem and having a supermajority, and that's just not healthy for a democracy. We need to have a balanced legislative body that understands both sides of an issue. And I was able to do that there. I think I can go back to Salem. I'll be able to do that again. I've already got ideas and thoughts to get back there and work together across the aisle. I was able to do that with both bills I passed unanimously through both the House and the Senate with no votes, and it was a good feeling to do that. That's my aim. That's why I want to run and get back down to Salem.
Great. So you lost to Anna Williams in a blue wave in 2018. What's changed in the legislature in the 2 years you've been gone?
The imbalance you see. Let's look at Measure 97. A couple years back, they voted no on Measure 97, and with the supermajority, they were able to bring back basically a gross receipts tax and able to tax on sales, and the voters didn't have a say in it. That's probably the biggest thing. That's, what I think it was $2.7 billion is what that is projected to raise taxes by. And it's down chain. So if you look at the agricultural industry here in Hood River and in the north part of the other part of the districts with the nurseries, it's every time that fruit or that item's touched and it goes to different hands, there's that 0.57, I believe it is, percent that each time gets added onto that. And by the time the consumer gets it, the cost of the goods go up. And so that's what's changed. You've seen a lot less cooperatives going on. I think you see the inability to have, if it's one party rule, the committees are all one-sided. When I was there during sine die, you had legislators that I looked to that were both on both sides of the aisle retiring, and they said to a T, the most productive time they ever had as a legislator and fun was when they had the 30-30 split. They had co-speakers, you had co-chairs on the committees, and you don't have that now. It's just things are getting shoved down people's throats. So long-winded answer, the people aren't being represented, and it's just a one-sided voice, and you can't have that in a democracy.
Well, let's say that you go back to Salem. What's the first bill you want to introduce?
First bill legislative concept would be we talk about climate change. I want to get businesses here that are on the cutting edge of using new energy sources, get them here, get them to develop their businesses here, bring those good paying jobs here, and create a work group to do that, like I did with the House bill, or with the education bill, that work group, and the ability to have those opportunities to grow a business here. And then eventually, hopefully, wean ourselves off of fossil fuels if we're able to do that. That'd be the first one I do. The other one I'd look at, go back to my education bill, the recruiting of the teachers. Where are we at with that? How can we keep and maintain our good teachers, and how do we provide best practices? And then the other one would be to look at, we talk about imagine change. Let's imagine how a school system can change. And if our budgets are decreasing, how do we better provide a service to, and I look at the service being educating our children. Are we doing a good job with that? And the next one's fix the department, the unemployment department. That's still a debacle, and people aren't getting their money yet. And we have to fix that too.
Yeah, that is really bad. Other than being part of a supermajority, how
Jeff?
Go, Mark, hello.
Yeah. Jeff, you lived in Portland for what, a quarter of a century? Were you living in the city when you were serving as a police officer?
I worked for the city, Portland, for 25 years, correct. I lived part of my career in Portland, I think 3 or 4 years there, and then I moved outside of the Portland metro area, and then eventually ended up in Cascade Locks.
So you've been living in your district for how long?
2006.
So I'm just wondering if you could talk about, I can't imagine a part of the state that has changed more in 13 years than your area, demographically. I assume voter registration. Can you talk a little bit about, how that district has changed?
So the district, I think in the Hood River side of the district's changed with influence from people from out of state moving here and creating rental homes and not being here as much. There has been influx of a different thought process, whether Democrat, Republican, Independent, non-affiliated, Libertarian. The overriding theme, though, is there's a Portland influence coming down I-84 into the gorge and starting in Cascade Locks, and actually in Corbett's.
Mm-hmm.
Corbett's part of the district too, East Multnomah County. Those ideas have changed, but I think all in all, people want reasonableness, and the people in the Sandy side of the district, I think that's it's still on the fairly conservative side of the political aisle out there in Sandy. So if that answers your question, Mark.
Well, what's the registration breakdown now in your district?
I think it's a +6 or 5.5. I don't know the number off the top of my head for Democratic registration.
I'm sorry, +6 for which?
Democratic registration, I believe.
And
I don't remember that.
You don't know? Okay.
I don't know that number off the top of my head.
Well, I'm wondering, is it, despite the blue wave that Aaron described, has registration changed in the 2 years? You think
I don't know. I can tell you, I have talked to people in my district that called themselves liberal Democrats or Democrats that were liberal leaning. They have decided to change their party affiliation, and become a Republican, because they think the Democratic Party's lost the way that they believed it was to be when they first were voting. But I don't, to give you that exact number, Mark, I don't have that.
You know, it seems to me pretty inevitable, Jeff, that the next session of the Oregon legislature is going to be considering whether or not they pass some attempt at police reform. You've got a quarter of a century of experience with the Portland Police.
You're killing me with that quarter of a century, making me sound old.
All right, 24 years. Is that any better? I'm just wondering, can you offer us your perspective on what's been happening in Portland for the last 100 days?
I have never seen civil unrest like this. I was part of that organization in Portland for 25 years, and there'd be small protests last for a couple of days. Even during the during the invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq, those protests were somewhat violent. I remember sitting on horseback watching a dumpster roll down the street on fire, and I was like, I've never seen that before. And after about a week, it was contained, quelled. People went back to their lives. But what we see now with this destruction and the violence that's happening, businesses being destroyed, people being assaulted in those businesses, it's not good. And so if we're going to talk about police reform, we need to have a voice in Salem, and we need to have the people that are going to make those changes go on a ride along. When's the last time you talked to a state legislator or a state senator that went on a ride along with Oregon State Police, Clackamas County Sheriff's Office, Hood River Sheriff's Office, Portland Police Bureau, to get to understand that? Because once you start looking at how Portland treats people or how Portland goes about their business, they're one of the most progressive law enforcement agencies, I believe, in the nation with their training and their opportunities. And so they need to have a measured response and get a lot of input on these policies that are coming down line. Because if we don't, you're going to change the way law enforcement is forever. And do you want your law enforcement officers to be reactive or proactive when it comes to arresting people and interacting in the crime? Because if you have all these protests that are going on now, you're watching the calls for service skyrocket and wait. There's just things that aren't being investigated. The shootings are surpassed any time that I was in the Portland Police Bureau, I think right now in this last year, because they can't focus on the things that they need to. With the gun violence task force being defunded, they're not out there engaging people, and people are dying because of it.
Jeff, I appreciate the larger context, and I do think that would be a perspective in Salem worth having. Let me refine the question, because I don't think I was being clear. You know, the vast majority of Portlanders who witnessed the protests and the violence did so from the armchair of their sofa, and was in part interpreted by what they saw on TV and what they read in Willamette Week. And my guess is you were not at the protests either.
Nope.
So you sort of had the same crow's nest that a lot of Portlanders did, but you've got the experience of being 25 years as a cop. So my question is, from your armchair, when you were watching the protests, independent of what you know about the police force and their history or whatever, but when you were watching it, did you watch it and say, oh man, some of those cops really did act out of hand? Based on what you saw, which of course is incomplete, just wondering if you had a reaction at all along those lines during anything that you witnessed or read about, where it struck you that Portland police were using excessive force.
I didn't get to see, like you said, armchair quarterback and not seeing it firsthand if it was excessive force or not. I'm sure there's opportunities where people can improve, but all in all, I think the lack of what happened there was not the fault of the Portland Police Bureau. The fault, I think, lies in with the leadership of Portland and how they try to control the narrative and allow those things to continue to go.
Okay, Jeff, thank you.
Yep.
Can I add, your largest campaign contributor, I believe, is something called the Evergreen PAC?
Yes.
What and or who is the Evergreen PAC?
The Evergreen PAC is just like they're the leadership PAC of Oregon for the Republican arm of the fundraising efforts for Republicans. Somewhat similar to what the Democrats have is Prosper Oregon, I think it is. Same. I can't remember.
Okay, so the Evergreen PAC is sort of the main central arm of the Oregon Republican Party.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Correct.
Well, they're supporting your campaign pretty heavily, so it sounds like they're counting on you flipping this seat.
Yes, we believe we can win it. We believe this seat was traditionally a conservative seat that was represented both sides well, and that's why they're supporting me in this campaign.
Okay. And I just have one other question, Aaron, and I'm sorry, but thank you.
Oh, it's
Is there anything about Anna Williams that you'd like us to know that maybe we don't know?
I don't know her personally to say something like that, but I do know that I think she is trying to rebrand herself because the Democratic Party's people don't like what's going on. And so all the literature you see that she's trying to be this independent voice, but she's voted 95% of the time down ticket with the Democrats. And every time she had the opportunity to vote for a tax increase, she would. And that's to me is telling that if she's trying to be a rural progressive, which I don't know what that's defined as, but I do know that she's trying to rebrand herself and get away from the Democratic Party because that's toxic right now.
Is that a term, rural progressive, that's being used now? That's interesting. I haven't heard that.
She used that in her last campaign, and she continues to use that within her campaign, calling herself a rural progressive. But here's the interesting part. If you use that term, when somebody asked her about what do you think about what's going on in Portland and the riots, she goes, well, I'm a rural legislator. That's a city problem. Last time I checked, the district is part of the metro area with Gresham, Troutdale, Sandy, and that's part of the metro area. So it's not a rural like you are out in Ontario, Oregon.
Right. But you can understand why people would prefer not to be asked or offer an opinion about what's going on in Portland.
I'm not afraid to answer a question. I'll answer it the best I can.
I like to tell people I live in Northwest Oregon.
Pretty close.
I'm kidding.
You're on the border, right?
No, I actually live in like downtown Portland.
Oh, okay.
So, obviously, you're campaigning chiefly on concerns about the supermajority and its power over Salem. I am curious, though, is there anything that your opponent has done in her 2 years that you particularly disagree with? Obviously, the tax votes, but how would you be different?
Last time I was down in Salem, it showed I was different. I was able to I'm going to go back to my 2 bills that I had passed, but I was able to develop relationships when I was in Salem. I went the day I was sworn in, I went and talked to all the representatives' staff to just meet them and say hi to them, and then connect with the representatives and the senators, and just try to figure out where we could find common ground. Senator Steiner Hayward, we had a great conversation about, hey, how can we work together? What can we get some bills passed and work together with? And her and I can tell you we're on different sides of the aisle on political philosophies, but how do we make Oregon better and work together to do that? And so that's the difference I can offer, and that's what I did, and that's what I'm going to continue to do.
Okay. When you hear from your constituents about your district and about Representative Williams' work in that district, what are they telling you?
They're not hearing from her. They don't feel representative. And numerous videos that I've taken talking with people think she's out of touch. There's a gentleman that just lives down the street from me. The funny thing is, Anna, actually, Representative Williams lives down the street from me also, within a couple block radius. And he called it propaganda. He was from Venezuela, and he says, that is propaganda, what he watches, and she's not representing us, and we need to stop and have a balanced Oregon, a balanced country. But he specifically used the word propaganda when he would see this stuff. He says, I've talked to her, but I don't believe her because she just tells me what I wanted to hear.
I had forgotten that this is the district where the two of you both live in Cascade Locks, like
Hood River. We live in Hood River.
Like,
yeah.
You live in Hood River, like 6 blocks from each other.
Yep.
Do you live in very different neighborhoods or like very similar neighborhoods?
Same neighborhood. I mean, literally, you can drive down the street and you can see the stop sign to the left. Her house is just down there. It's a few blocks away. Mid 70s homes.
Do you bump into each other jogging?
Nope. I once in a while see her husband's car. I see him in it driving by my house when I'm out for a walk or whatever. But.
Enough of that line of inquiry. It's not going anywhere. I had another question, but it's escaping me.
Jeff, I do have a question. Who's the largest employer in your district?
Largest lawyer?
No, employer.
Employer. So Hood River Centric is going to be in situ. And they're on both sides of the river. They're a Boeing company. Yeah,
Right.
there's your other ones.
I thought they were mostly, in Washington.
They're on both sides of the river now.
Really? They have,
Yes.
they're doing manufacturing and assembly in
There's
Oregon?
manufacturing in Oregon, but the business offices and the other things are on this side of the river. They've split it out.
Is this intended to be some sort of a tax dodge? I mean, how do they do that?
I don't know. I don't know Boeing's business. I just know that they have the manufacturing on the one side where Washington's based out, or Boeing's based out of, and then they have business offices and stuff here because I went and visited them one time.
And you think they're the largest employer?
The largest employer is going to be not a singular person, but it's going to be the orchardists and the farming
Yeah,
community.
no, but I meant like Hood River Distillery, I thought at one point was.
I don't know their actual numbers with COVID and where they're at, but they are a large business here. You've got Sandy. There's another fruit manufacturing plant that's out there that's got quite a few. I just don't have those exact numbers because, unfortunately, when I go out and meet businesses, you can't do that and ask those direct questions.
How are you seeing COVID affect your district in particular?
Depends on where you're at. If you look at this side of the mountain, the businesses and COVID, they've really did the parklets. They've opened up as much. People are usually generally wearing masks, but you go over on the sandy side, no, not as people don't wear masks as much. And people do respectful of going into business with masks, but it seems more business as usual on that side of the mountain than it is over on this side. When I was out during the fires and helping with fire relief efforts, distributing water and food, not a lot of people were wearing masks because the smoke was so bad, but it was just people were shaking hands and hugs and things like that. And I was kind of surprised about it. Here, it's not so much. There's two different sides of the mountain. The
fires, how did they affect your district?
Horrible. You had a fire that encroached right up to the district lines, and they had the Estacada and Boring and all those areas right there. They came right up to it, and smoke. I've watched when I was go there on the weekends, people just had their cars packed with the most precious belongings and asking for help with water and food. And can we come back tomorrow? Is it okay? Yeah, absolutely. And so it was bad. The smoke was terrible. People, kind of sheltered in place again. I worked for a company that flew these infrared missions that flew over the fires, that mapped them for the Forest Service, and watching those fires grow and seeing it from that literally a bird's eye view of how big they've gotten. It was pretty scary to see how fast they moved through and how big they grew.
Between the twin devastations of COVID and these fires, what does your district need most right now?
To open back up, get businesses open. And I think that the reason why they're afraid of opening is the business liability for the COVID protections, that if those protections would have been in place, there was a missed opportunity in Salem last special session to get that done and put those in place. People could have opened up, schools could have opened up, because it allowed businesses, if they just established the proper protocols and they weren't at fault, they would be protected from frivolous lawsuits.
Okay. Mark,
I don't know. I'm going to kind of finish that up, and I don't know why that didn't get an opportunity to go there. There was bipartisan support, but I do know, and I'm going to go back to things to know about Anna. The trial lawyers were a large donor in her campaign last cycle to the tune of 40, and I think $40K. And I think this last week or so, she had $17,000 of trial lawyer monies going in there, and we don't have those protections for businesses to open back up.
This is legislation that would have protected businesses from COVID-related liability.
Correct.
Okay.
And schools.
But I mean, there is some reason to think that would that bill have protected them from liability even if they were breaking OHA regulations?
No, if they were found in violation, they wouldn't have. It's only if they're following the rules. Like,
okay, that's okay. That makes sense. Mark, any further questions?
Jeff, I've only got one other question, which is, who are you going to vote for president?
Here's the deal. Whoever's in office needs to be supportive, and that's my deal with the Constitution when I took that oath long ago. And I really value our system, how we go in behind the private curtain, pull the lever we used to, or push the button, and or write our name, write what we want on the ballot. I think for me, having that secrecy and the ability to keep that I appreciate that. But to your end, after looking at both candidates, they're both politicians, and it's hard to trust what a lot of them say. And so at the end of the day, I know who I'll probably vote for, but that's between me and my ballot.
Wait a minute, Jeff. You mean to tell me you're not willing to tell your constituents who you're supporting for president because of the privacy of the ballot?
That's what we can do. I support the president right now. He's gotten some great economic.
I realize there's no law compelling you to tell us who you're supporting, but it would seem to me that it's a reasonable question. It's not just seems to me, it is. It's a reasonable question. If people want to know your values and what you support, I mean, you've been very articulate explaining your positions, your values, where you are on the issues. Why is this the one thing you're unwilling to share with your voters? I mean, I'm not in your district, but I'd be concerned about lack of transparency.
How is it transparent? We can go back and forth on the question. I've answered where I'm at with it.
Well, if that's your answer, that's your answer. I was giving you another opportunity, but it sounds like you don't want to take it.
Thanks, Mark.
So, Aaron, I'm done with my questions.
Great. I have the fun one. Every cycle we ask a question to hopefully get people to know you as a person a little bit. And this cycle, it's a technology question based on all of our remote situations. What's the most awkward moment you've had on a Zoom call?
I've got a 6 and 8 year old kids. I am down here talking downstairs, and mom wasn't home. They were upstairs doing something. They start yelling as I'm on this meeting and talking loudly. And my daughter comes in, Dad, who are you talking to? You're just looking at your computer screen. What's going on? And then she comes in and photobombs it as we're having a little get together, a little coffee get together meeting, and everybody's laughing. And she kind of does a little funny dance and bails out of here pretty quick. And so that's probably the most funniest and awkward kind of moment, because you're just talking to your computer screen. Nobody's there. You're right, kid.
There's a certain accuracy in how she's describing your situation, which is bleak when you think about it.
Yeah.
Jeff, I really appreciate your time. I'm going to turn the recording off and we're good to go. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, Jeff.
Hey, one thing, I would like to have the opportunity to be endorsed by you guys. I think it's important. Your newspapers had to change how it goes about the messaging, but people still listen to this paper, and it values that. And I think if you guys agree that having an imbalanced legislative body is a problem, having your endorsement for me to say that we need to have balance back in Salem is a big deal, and that would tell the constituents a lot. So I'm going to ask for your endorsement.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff.
All right, Mark.